Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we cut through the noise and get straight to the insights. If you've ever felt that overwhelming wave of frustration trying to learn a new language, especially English, maybe you feel like you're surrounded by just an endless sea of textbooks, apps, online courses, and, conflicting advice, then you know exactly the struggle we're here to tackle today. It's that feeling of kind of drowning in information, hitting a wall of demotivation because despite all your effort, nothing seems to really stick. You spend hours, maybe even years, and you still feel like you're not making genuine progress. Those common pitfalls and just the sheer mental exhaustion, they're incredibly real, aren't they?
Absolutely. It's a paradox, really. You've got this sheer volume of resources and advice out there, but instead of being like a clear path, it often leads to analysis paralysis.
Right.
You start questioning every method, every app, every bit of advice you've ever received, and before you know it, you're more confused and disheartened than when you began.
Yeah.
You end up studying about learning English rather than actually learning English itself.
Precisely. It's that feeling of just constantly spinning your wheels. So today we're taking a truly fascinating and I think essential deep dive, effective English language learning. Specifically, we're pulling some incredible, actionable insights from what I can only describe as a gold mine of a source. It's a YouTube video called How to Learn English. Best way to learn English through story improve your English graded reader from the Bookish English channel.
Ah, right.
It's just packed with practical wisdom that feels refreshingly different from the usual advice you hear.
Yeah, this particular source, it offers a remarkably authentic and grounded perspective. You can tell it's drawn from years of practical teaching experience and a deep sort of empathetic understanding of what truly hinders or, more importantly, what helps learners navigate this complex journey. He really cuts through the academic jargon and gets right to the heart of those real-world challenges people face.
Our mission today, then, is to extract those surprising nuggets of wisdom, those practical strategies that aren't just about how to learn English more effectively, but maybe even more importantly, why certain approaches truly work on a fundamental level.
Okay.
We want to arm you, our listener, with clarity and confidence on your own language journey, helping you navigate the sometimes treacherous waters of language acquisition with, hopefully, a stronger compass. Okay, let's unpack this and get right into it.
Let's do it.
So let's kick things off with a really common, almost baffling problem that the source highlights pretty much straight away. It's an observation I think many English students and teachers can probably relate to. A lot of learners, even those making huge investments, like we're talking about traveling across continents, spending serious money to study in places like London.
Right. Big commitments.
Exactly. They often neglect a crucial yet deceptively simple element, daily, authentic English listening. It's almost baffling, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
They'll spend the money, cross oceans, commit to these rigorous classes, but then miss out on this fundamental, consistent piece of exposure.
It truly is baffling from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
And the source offers some incredibly keen insights into why this neglect happened. Part of it, they suggest, is simply that learners don't know what to listen to.
Right.
They just perceive this lack of suitable, engaging material. And this often leads to another very common pitfall, relying too heavily on, popular media like TV shows and movies for their main listening practice.
Okay, yeah, that seems like an obvious go-to.
It does, but the source points out a critical flaw. Film and television are inherently visual mediums. So much of what you understand from a movie, the plot, the characters' emotions, the context, it comes directly from the visual storytelling, right? The expressions, the actions, the setting, not purely from the audio language itself. Your brain is efficiently using those visual cues to fill in the linguistic gaps, which means your ear isn't getting the full, intense workout it really needs for pure auditory comprehension. You might feel like you understand.
Right, because you're following the story.
Exactly. But it's often quite superficial, linguistically speaking.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. You think you're getting the dialogue because you're following the action, but it's not truly deep linguistic comprehension of just the spoken words.
Precisely.
And then when students do try to find dedicated listening material, they hit another wall. Podcasts made for native speakers, whether it's news from the BBC or some popular interview show, they're often just too difficult.
Yeah, way too fast, too much slang.
Totally. You listen for 5 minutes, maybe you only grasp like 10 or 20% of the words, and boom, your motivation just evaporates. It becomes this frustrating exercise in confusion rather than a learning experience.
Precisely. It's like trying to run a marathon before you've even learned to walk properly.
Yeah.
And what's particularly fascinating here is the contrast the source draws with podcasts specifically designed for learners.
Okay, yeah, there are loads of those.
There are, and while they're certainly useful and well-intentioned, the source critiques many of them for being either, well, dull or maybe too focused on language learning at the expense of entertainment.
Okay, so like too textbooky.
Kind of, yeah. This is a critical, often overlooked distinction. The source emphasizes that to listen to English for extended periods of time, you have to have an interest in what is being talked about, or you have to find it entertaining.
That seems obvious, but yeah.
It does. But think about it. Remember that time you were forced to study something you found incredibly dull? How much did you really retain, even after hours of effort?
Hardly anything.
Right. Now contrast that with absorbing a compelling story or a lively debate on a topic you're genuinely passionate about. Even if it's in a foreign language, your brain isn't just passively receiving. It's actively trying to decode meaning because it wants to know what happens next.
You're hooked.
Exactly. That deep emotional engagement isn't just a bonus. It's the very engine of language acquisition. If the content isn't genuinely engaging, it feels like a chore. You just won't sustain the listening required for real progress.
Right.
It becomes a tick box exercise rather than an enjoyable immersion, which is where the true learning happens. Sustained, enjoyable listening is where the magic unfolds. But yeah, high difficulty or just plain dullness are huge deterrents.
So if native speaker podcasts are too hard and many learner podcasts are, let's say, too dull or too academic, what's the middle ground? What's the solution that actually keeps people engaged?
Well, this brings us perfectly to the core motivation behind the Bookish English podcast itself, as described in the source.
Right.
The creator basically set out to build something learners would actually want to listen to, something that went beyond just the mechanics of learning English, and instead offered genuine value and enjoyment.
Right.
The aim was explicitly to make content both entertaining as well as informative. Sounds like a simple idea, a basic principle of good content.
Yeah, good content creation 101.
Exactly. But for language learning, it has truly profound implications.
You've hit on something crucial there. What's fascinating is how the creator achieves this, and it really comes down to a set of conscious, deliberate techniques.
Okay, like what?
The source states the podcast is kept as authentic as possible, meaning they actively avoid being simplistic or grading English too much.
Huh. That's interesting for a learner resource.
It is, yeah. It's a deliberate and kind of counterintuitive choice. Rather than oversimplifying the language itself, the creator focuses intensely on the delivery and the inherent interests of the content.
Yeah.
They consciously decide to speak enthusiastically about subjects which I personally find interesting, whether that's a historical event, a piece of literature, or just a personal reflection.
So genuine passion comes across.
Exactly. The powerful implication here is that by sharing genuine, unforced enthusiasm for a topic, the creator aims for the listener to keep listening, not because they have to, but because they want to. They want the listener to feel personally involved in the discussion, almost like they're part of a conversation with a friend.
Right.
And this approach fosters natural, almost effortless language acquisition through extensive exposure, almost without the listener realizing they're in a focused language lesson.
Yeah, it sort of bypasses that mental resistance we often associate with studying.
Totally. It taps directly into our natural human curiosity.
This immediately reminds me of one of the foundational theories in language acquisition, something that really underpins the whole approach you're describing.
Yeah.
Isn't there a well-known framework, perhaps from Stephen Krashen?
Yes. Stephen Krashen. That's exactly who the source brings up. His ideas really underpin a lot of what we understand about how we learn English, especially outside a formal classroom.
Right.
So let's talk about his core framework, because it's directly referenced and it's fundamental.
Absolutely. Krashen, who's, a huge name in second language acquisition theory, proposed two distinct fundamental ways we develop language skills. Understanding these is key.
Okay, what are they?
The first is what he calls language acquisition. Now, this is a subconscious or passive way of learning. It's incredibly similar to how children naturally pick up their first language.
Right, just by being around it.
Exactly. Think about it. A child isn't sitting there studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists.
No.
They're simply immersed in their environment, hearing language used meaningfully to communicate. The critical element in acquisition isn't rote memorization. It's focusing entirely on the message within the language itself.
So understanding what's being said.
Yes, engaging with the content deeply enough to react emotionally. You might laugh at something genuinely funny, feel moved by a poignant story, or just genuinely understand the core meaning and respond to it.
Okay.
The source explicitly mentions that you might not even realize immediately that you've learned new language this way. It primarily informs your passive knowledge.
Passive knowledge, meaning...
Meaning you understand it when you hear or read it, but you might not be able to produce it yourself yet, like speak or write it fluently. It's a very natural, organic, and often effortless process that happens when your brain is simply trying to comprehend meaning.
Okay, so that's acquisition. What's the alternative, the more traditional approach many of us know?
The second way is language learning, and this contrasts sharply with acquisition. Learning is a conscious process.
Okay.
This is where you actively focus on specific forms, things like diligently studying grammar rules, memorizing verb conjugations, or analyzing sentence structure.
Right. Textbooks, classes.
Exactly. This typically involves formal instruction, a teacher explaining concepts using grammar books, and often direct error correction. Now, the downsides highlighted in the source for this approach, especially when it's used in isolation or as the primary method, are pretty significant. It can be dogmatic, boring, complex, and abstract.
Yeah, I think we've all felt that.
Right. And crucially, it doesn't replicate the organic way we acquire language as children, nor does it truly facilitate that deep subconscious acquisition that comes from simply engaging with language to understand a message.
So it's less natural.
Much less natural. While conscious learning definitely has its place, it's a different beast entirely. It often leads to the situation where you know the rules, like you can recite them.
Yeah, you can pass the test.
Exactly. But you struggle to actually apply them fluently in a real-time conversation.
Okay, so if Krashen draws this fundamental distinction, what does this all mean for how you, our listeners, should approach learning English? How does understanding this theory actually impact your daily study routine, or maybe even shift your whole mindset about what learning English really means?
Well, the profound difference between these two modes, acquisition and learning, it can radically shift a learner's perspective. You move from seeing language learning as primarily this grind of memorizing rules to embracing a more natural, engaging, and ultimately more effective approach. Krashen's insights provide a powerful scientific basis for the podcast creators method we were just talking about.
Right, the engaging content.
Exactly. By making the content genuinely interesting, authentic, and delivered with enthusiasm, they are tapping directly into the acquisition process. This means less rigid focus on abstract grammatical rules and more on meaningful interaction with the language.
So it's less about knowing about the language.
Yes. Less about knowing all the grammar definitions and more about getting a feel for the language. Developing an intuitive sense of what sounds right, much like a native speaker develops.
Okay.
Now, it's crucial to understand that while learning often gets a bit of a bad rap in this context, Krashen himself never argued it was useless.
Oh, okay.
He simply said it plays a different, more limited role, primarily as a monitor or editor for our output.
Oh.
It helps us polish what we've already acquired.
Right, like checking your writing.
Exactly. So for our listeners, it's not about throwing your grammar book out the window entirely.
Yeah.
But it's about understanding where it fits into your overall strategy. If you're struggling to speak fluently and spontaneously, endlessly drilling grammar rules might not be the main solution. But if you're trying to refine your written English for, say, a formal report or a specific test like IELTS, then conscious learning becomes an incredibly valuable tool for accuracy and precision.
That distinction is incredibly important. It really reframes how we think about study. And this brings us nicely to a concept the source calls a balanced diet in language learning.
A balanced diet, I like that.
Yeah. It's not about choosing either acquisition or learning. It's about blending the two effectively, much like, a healthy diet includes different food groups. So how does one achieve this essential balanced diet in practice?
Well, source really emphasizes prioritizing acquisition as the main course of this balanced diet.
Okay, so focus on that natural intake first.
Right. It strongly recommends that you just engage with the language as it is used in natural, authentic, and meaningful situations. Think of the boot camp analogy the source gives.
Okay.
If you get a job in an English-speaking environment, say working in a cafe in London or joining a multinational company,
Yeah.
you're essentially forced to improve quickly.
Yeah, sink or swim. It's
Yeah.
tough, yes. But you're constantly focusing on communicative acts and meaningful messages. You're not studying rules from a textbook. You're just trying to survive, understand instructions, respond to customers, communicate effectively to get your job done.
Right.
This intense real-world pressure leads to incredibly natural and rapid acquisition because your brain is relentlessly trying to derive meaning from all the input it receives.
But, I mean, not everyone can just up and move to an English-speaking country for a language boot camp.
Right.
Right? That's where a resource like this podcast really comes into its own, is a powerful tool.
Exactly. That's the crucial point. For those who can't immerse themselves fully in a native-speaking environment, or maybe don't have access to native speakers in that daily intensive way,
Yeah.
the source positions this type of podcast as a viable and highly effective substitute. It's not identical to working in an English-speaking office, of course.
Sure.
But the key point is that by regularly and consistently following the podcast's content over long periods, you can replicate aspects of that experience.
By just attempting to follow what the speaker is saying, engaging with it for pure meaning, and doing that consistently over weeks, months, or even years, you'll pick up massive amounts of English through that subconscious acquisition process.
Ah, okay.
It's about creating your own consistent, enjoyable exposure bubble right where you are whenever you have time.
So that covers the powerful acquisition side, the consistent, enjoyable immersion. What about traditional formal language learning, the kind we might associate with textbooks and grammar drills? Does it still have a significant place in this balanced diet?
Absolutely, it does. The source doesn't advocate abandoning formal study at all.
Good.
Instead, it suggests that formal study can and should be a powerful companion to this acquisition-focused listening.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, you can use the podcast to back up, confirm, or clarify what you're studying in a textbook or a language class. For instance, let's say you've just been studying the past perfect tense in your grammar book. You can then listen to a story on the podcast and actively try to notice how that tense is used in natural flowing speech. How does it sound? In what context does it appear?
Right, see it in action.
Exactly. This not only validates your textbook knowledge, but crucially, it contextualizes it, bringing those abstract rules to life. The source stresses that you should always refer to authentic language usage as a way of checking language that you've studied. This really emphasizes the importance of real-world application over just abstract rules, grounding your learning in how English is actually used by native speakers.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, moving beyond just passive listening. The podcast isn't just for that subconscious soaking up of language. How can it become an active study tool? What specific actionable methods does the source recommend for listeners who want to, roll up their sleeves and truly dig into the material?
Yeah, this is great stuff. The source provides several detailed, really actionable methods to transform listening into active, highly effective study. First, and perhaps most obviously, you can use transcripts.
Okay, read along.
Read along with the audio, and as you find new words, check them in a dictionary. But, and this is key, go beyond just the basic definition.
How so?
Pay attention to the grammatical context the word is used in, how words collocate, which words naturally go together.
Like make a decision, not do a decision.
Exactly. Or heavy rain, not strong rain. Noticing these natural pairings as you listen will not only make your English sound far more native and accurate,
Right.
but also significantly improve your comprehension. Make notes of these new words or structures, and crucially, actively practice using them yourself in sentences later on.
Okay, using transcripts makes sense. And for those who really want to push themselves, what about a technique that sounds quite challenging? Writing their own transcripts. That seems like a deep dive in itself.
It is, absolutely. And it's a remarkably powerful and revealing exercise. The source suggests transcribing a section of an episode yourself, even one that already has an official transcript available. You listen carefully, trying to write down every single word. Maybe mark bits you can't identify with question marks. Listen again and again.
Yeah, painstaking work.
It can be. Then, compare your transcription to the official one. This process immediately and starkly highlights the gap between what you understand and what I said.
Ah, I see.
You'll pinpoint words you didn't know, realize why you missed certain pronunciations or maybe linked words, and then you can work specifically to close that gap and integrate that new knowledge into your own active English. It's a very direct way to find your blind spots and systematically address them.
That sounds incredibly effective, actually. So it's about that focused, deliberate practice. What about when you're just listening casually, though? Maybe on your commute or while doing chores. Can you still make that active, even without a pen and paper?
Yes, absolutely. The source encourages what it calls mindful listening. Even without formal study or pausing to make notes, your primary aim should always be to focus on the message, right? Just enjoy and understand the story or discussion. But while doing that, you can also consciously notice specific aspects of the language too. For example, you might hear the phrase depend on and think, oh, right, it's depend on, not depend of.
Just a little mental note.
Exactly. You don't have to formally study it right then. Just consciously notice it. This builds a powerful passive awareness over time, a subconscious database of correct usage that accumulates and shapes your linguistic intuition.
Right.
Your brain is constantly making connections and recognizing patterns, even when you're not actively dissecting them.
And I know some episodes of the podcast are even designed to be more targeted towards specific language points, right? They're not all just stories.
That's correct. While the main aim is always to engage and keep you interested with authentic English, some episodes are specifically designed to draw your attention to the language more specifically.
Oh, okay.
They might teach and explain vocabulary items related to a topic, or bring your attention to an aspect of pronunciation or grammar. In these episodes, you have flexibility. You can either just chill out and follow what's being said, enjoying the content, or you can choose to be more active and make notes of the vocabulary, try to remember phrases, listen again, and pause the recording to test your memory. It offers a spectrum of engagement based on your energy levels, your goals, and how deep you want to go that day.
This all ties back beautifully to another one of Krashen's foundational ideas, doesn't it? The effective filter hypothesis. It sounds a bit technical, maybe a bit academic.
It does sound a bit jargony.
Yeah, but it's essentially about how our feelings, our emotional state, profoundly impact our ability to learn a language. We've all had those days where no matter how interesting the material is, our brain just feels, well, blocked. So how exactly do these mental blocks work according to Krashen?
That's a crucial point, and it explains so much about why some learners thrive while others really struggle, even with good resources. The core idea of the effective filter hypothesis is that good learning conditions are characterized by things like motivation, high self-esteem, and relaxation.
Okay, positive feelings.
Right. When these elements are strongly present, they create an open channel, allowing the flow of acquisition to move freely into your subconscious. Conversely, when a learner is stressed, anxious, or feeling bad about themselves, perhaps due to fear of making mistakes, embarrassment, or pressure to perform, it creates a mental block.
Like a wall?
Kinda, yeah. Like an internal filter that prevents language acquisition from happening effectively. The source gives a vivid and relatable example: an unhappy language class.
Oh, yeah.
If you feel constantly stressed by pressure from the teacher, judged by classmates for your errors, or if you have low self-confidence because you don't get positive reinforcement, you're simply not enjoying the experience.
No.
As a result, a mental barrier forms, preventing the input, the language you hear, from being processed and acquired properly. In fact, it can even make the situation worse because you start associating learning English with painful or boring classroom situations, creating this negative feedback loop that just shuts down the natural learning process.
Wow. Okay, so if that's the problem, these emotional and psychological barriers, how does this deep dive, or specifically this type of podcast, tackle that effective filter head on? How does it help create those ideal, unblocked learning conditions Krashen describes?
This is truly one of the main advantages the source identifies for a podcast like Best English Stories. The fundamental emphasis is on fun, and crucially, there's nothing to fear or worry about.
Right, low pressure.
Exactly. You're not being judged, there are no tests, no one is correcting your pronunciation in real time. It aims to be an extremely pleasurable experience. The creator even shares a personal anecdote about listening to, I think it was the Mark Kermode and Simon Mayo film review podcast.
Yeah, great show.
Describing the joy and how they feel like friends having a genuine, engaging conversation. This type of podcast aims to replicate that feeling.
Okay.
So listening in a comfort zone, whether that's on a busy underground train, while cooking dinner in the bath, or even while drifting off to sleep, it eliminates those mental blocks. Your brain is relaxed, receptive, and open to receiving the language without the pressure of performance. You're not worried about making mistakes or being judged, so your brain is free to naturally acquire the language.
And podcasts just by their very nature, offer incredible flexibility that aligns perfectly with this idea of a comfort zone, don't they? You can learn literally anywhere, anytime.
They absolutely do. The source highlights the immense freedom you have to listen whenever and wherever you want. This fosters a sense of personal comfort and significantly reduces any external pressure. But critically, it delves into a strong, vital recommendation for repetition. Listening more than once is described as vital. Once is not enough.
Okay, so re-listening is important. Why?
The idea is that just scratching the surface isn't enough for deep acquisition. Repeated listening allows you to get really familiar with the content. Each time you listen, you notice and remember things that you didn't catch the first time. Maybe a subtle intonation, a specific collocation, a new idiom, or even just a phrase you initially misheard.
Ah, okay. Things sink in more.
Exactly. This profound reinforcement of patterns, intonation, and responses helps embed the language deeply. The source gives these vivid examples, like remembering Star Wars lines or Monty Python sketches through heavy rotation.
Yeah, you just know them.
Right. You didn't consciously study them, but through repeated exposure, entire phrases and even their intonation can naturally find their way into your vocabulary, becoming part of your intuitive understanding and eventually your active production.
Wow.
This isn't just about memorization. It's about embedding the language so deeply into your subconscious that it becomes an almost automatic part of your linguistic intuition.
We've talked a lot about listening, from that passive subconscious acquisition to active focused engagement. But what are some final powerful tips for optimizing the skill, for truly deepening your listening comprehension beyond just understanding the main message?
Yeah, the source offers some excellent, perhaps even counterintuitive advice here. First, and this is crucial, embrace the challenge.
Okay. Don't shy away from difficult stuff.
Exactly. It's fine to listen to things that you don't completely understand. In fact, the source argues strongly that you should push yourself and don't get put off if there are things you don't grasp immediately. Don't worry about understanding every single word.
Really?
Yeah, that struggle is good because your brain is really piecing things together actively. It's forming hypotheses, making connections, even when things are ambiguous.
So the effort itself is beneficial.
Absolutely. So persevere even when you feel confused. Don't let that initial lack of understanding stop you from continuing to listen and engage. It's often in that struggle that true growth occurs.
Okay, that's a great perspective. So it's not about immediate 100% comprehension, but about trusting the process and letting your brain do the work.
Exactly. The process of making sense of unfamiliar input is itself a powerful learning mechanism. And the second tip is to actively tune into accents.
Yeah. English has so many.
It does. The source suggests actively trying to identify subtle differences between accents. You might only notice little differences at first, perhaps a particular vowel sound or the way a T is pronounced. But gradually, with consistent effort, you'll become more and more aware of these variations. This trains your ear for the incredible diversity of real-world English.
Right, so you're not just used to one type of voice.
Exactly. It prepares you for conversations with speakers from all over the globe, making you a more flexible and robust listener.
This source isn't just about listening, though it clearly emphasizes it as the foundation. It also touches on how all four core language skills, listening, reading, writing, and speaking, are intertwined, and how you can develop them holistically. We've covered listening pretty extensively, but let's briefly touch on the others to get the complete picture of a balanced approach.
Indeed. Beyond the extensive insights into listening, the source offers valuable guidance for the other schools too. For reading, for instance.
Yeah, what about reading?
It recommends not just reading the podcast transcripts, which we discussed as excellent active listening tool, but also engaging with a variety of texts more broadly.
Okay.
The key here is finding things you genuinely enjoy reading, but also being strategic about your purpose for learning.
What do you mean?
Well, if you need English for business, make a point of reading business reports, articles on industry trends, or professional blogs. If you're a sports fan, seek out English sports journalism.
Got it. Connect it to your interests or needs.
Exactly. If you're into true crime, find podcasts with transcripts or blogs about real cases. Connect reading with your existing interests to make the engagement truly authentic. Otherwise, just reading any well-written text for enjoyment is a really good way to improve your literacy and broaden your vocabulary and understanding of different styles. The source even mentions plans to provide lists of good, free online books, blogs, and newspapers, emphasizing accessible, enjoyable reading. Remember, extensive reading doesn't just expand vocab. It subtly solidifies grammar patterns and exposes you to different styles and cultural nuances.
And writing. That's often considered a separate, maybe more challenging skill, but definitely one that needs consistent development, especially for many learners.
That's right. And while the podcast primarily focuses on spoken English, writing is certainly addressed. Transcribing podcast episodes, as we discussed,
Yeah, that intense practice.
is highlighted as incredibly beneficial for writing, as it forces you to pay close attention to structure, spelling, phrasing. Beyond that, the source also suggests maybe writing your own personal blog or even just writing comments in response to podcast episodes.
Okay, practical applications.
Right. The advice is to try and concisely express your opinion in a structured way, using appropriate words, perhaps even incorporating new vocabulary from the episode you just heard. You should actively consider the reader, aiming to make your writing easy and enjoyable for them to follow, focusing on stating your points clearly and efficiently. However, there's a crucial caveat.
Okay.
If you need to practice for specific tests like IELTS or TOEFL, the source is clear. You'll need more specifically focused writing practice, probably with a dedicated preparation book or course that addresses the particular demands of those exams. General commenting won't cut it for those.
Makes sense. And finally speaking, this is often the most intimidating skill for learners, the one that makes people feel the most vulnerable.
Absolutely.
The source emphasizes, and I think this is a critical point, that the best way to improve your speaking is to actually practice it in real-life situations.
Can't beat real practice.
Right. These situations, it says, train you to say the right things at the right time with the right tone, essentially forcing you to activate your passive knowledge under pressure. And while teachers certainly play a vital role in providing error correction and guidance, the podcast itself, despite being primarily audio, can contribute significantly to this.
Okay, so if the podcast is mainly an audio medium, how can it directly enhance our speaking? That seems a bit counterintuitive at first, you're mostly listening. But the source has some really concrete, actionable methods that bridge that gap.
It absolutely does, and they're incredibly effective if you actually commit to them. The first is through mimicry and application.
Okay, copy.
Sort of, yeah. You're actively encouraged to take some aspects of my speech and apply it to your speech. Now, this isn't about erasing your own accent or identity.
Right.
It's about consciously incorporating new words or phrases you've heard, picking up specific speech patterns like pausing for effect or linking ideas, or even adopting certain pronunciations of tricky sounds.
Okay.
The idea is to consciously use the speaker as a kind of model for your own developing speech, experimenting with new ways of expressing yourself.
That makes perfect sense. Hearing how a native speaker says things and then consciously trying to replicate parts of it. It's like learning to play an instrument by listening to a master.
Precisely. And more specifically, the source recommends to copy and repeat. Listen to a line, then pause and repeat it and try to sound exactly like me.
Okay, really focus on the sound.
Exactly. This goes beyond just repeating the words. It focuses intensely on vowel and consonant sounds, combinations of consonants, and especially connected speech, which is how words naturally merge and sounds drop or get added when spoken fluently.
Like gotta or wanna.
Exactly. Or how cup of tea flows together. Cup of tea. This is where fluency truly lies, in those natural connections. The source even mentions a planned episode specifically on connected speech, which just underscores how important this detailed aspect of pronunciation is.
Okay, what's a truly powerful technique for really pinpointing where you need to improve your speaking, almost like a self-diagnosis tool?
A really powerful technique, maybe one of the most revealing, is to record and compare.
Record yourself.
Yeah. Pick a short extract from the podcast that has a transcript and record yourself saying it. Then immediately compare your version to the original speakers.
Okay, that sounds potentially painful, but useful.
Maybe. But then take it a step further. Work on the transcript. Underline the stressed words. Maybe add lines to represent pauses for emphasis. Identify where words link together in pronunciation. Listen to the original again with your marked up transcript. And then re-record yourself, this time focusing intensely on getting the intonation, the pausing, the sentence stress right. This iterative process is invaluable for developing awareness and control of speech patterns.
Yeah, you really hear the difference.
For sure. You'll quickly identify where your natural speech deviates from native patterns. And a more free-form version is to simply record responses. If the podcast discusses, say, UFOs,
okay,
you could record yourself talking about UFOs afterwards, trying to incorporate new vocabulary or phrases you just heard in the episode. You could even leave an audio comment on platforms like Audioboo, which the source uses.
Okay, so active output based on the input.
Exactly. But beyond solo practice and self-correction, the source points to the immense power of community and just taking initiative. This isn't just about what you do on your own, is it? It's about breaking out of that comfort zone.
Not at all. The importance of active participation in community is absolutely paramount. The source reiterates that the best way to improve speaking, hands down, is through real-life practice.
Right.
It urges you to join clubs, meet English speakers, use the internet, and find groups on meetup.com, specifically for language exchanges or shared interests.
Get out there.
Yeah. The call to action here is incredibly clear and direct. Put yourself outside your comfort zone. Don't be shy. Give it a try. Take the initiative. Because ultimately, and this is a harsh but necessary truth, no one can do the speaking for you. You have to open your mouth and make sounds.
And that often means confronting the fear of making mistakes, which can be a huge, paralyzing hurdle for so many learners.
It is, but the source offers crucial, liberating insight here. No shame in making mistakes.
Easier said than done sometimes.
True. But it even humorously suggests that you have to say something wrong about 5 times before you get it right. The empowering advice is to simply get through those 5 times nice and quick, and then you'll probably be fine.
Okay. Just rip the Band-Aid off.
Pretty much. And for those who are currently in classroom dynamics, the message is equally clear. Don't be one of those quiet students. The classroom, despite its potential pressures, is ironically a safe place to experiment and make mistakes, because everyone else is learning too.
Good point.
You're strongly encouraged to switch off your editor, that inner voice of self-doubt and perfectionism that stops you from speaking. Stay positive, be talkative, and even help others, which actually reinforces your own learning.
To really drive these points home, the source shares some invaluable expert insights from Zik, who's described as a Czech teacher with a master's degree in English and a dedicated listener to the podcast.
Okay, so a perspective from another experienced learner and teacher.
Exactly. His comments on using the podcast for speaking add a fantastic, real-world external perspective that really validates everything we've been discussing.
Great. What does Zik suggest?
Well, Zik's insights strongly emphasize an active, almost aggressive approach to speaking. His first suggestion is to contact the LEP community, that's the Luke's English podcast community, which this source is based on.
Okay, use the community.
Yeah. He points out there are loads of interesting people from around the world eager to learn, so connect with those at a similar level and with shared interests, maybe sci-fi, sports, or even just the podcast itself. Befriend them, add them on social media, start Skype conversations. It's about leveraging that community for mutual learning.
Okay, makes sense. What's the second practical tip for solo practice?
His second tip is to record yourself speaking about topics related to the podcast episodes. Ask yourself questions, answer them out loud, or simply practice vocabulary that Best English Stories has taught you.
Right, like we discussed.
Yes, but then crucially, listen back to yourself. Try correcting your errors, re-record, compare your recordings you made sometime later to see your improvements. This self-reflection and iterative improvement loop is key.
That constant cycle of practice and refinement.
Exactly. Now, this next one requires a fair bit of courage. Recording audio comments for public consumption.
Ooh, okay, like on Audioboo.
Precisely. Zik stresses this point with great passion. Record comments for platforms like Audioboo up to 3 minutes long. He asks, kind of rhetorically, why is everyone so shy? Is everyone afraid that they will be judged? Who cares? Just be friendly and you should be accepted by the community.
Strong words.
Yeah. He reminds us that teachers deal with mistakes every day and quotes the saying, a man who never made mistakes never made anything. He directly challenges the listener to face our greatest fear, public humiliation.
Wow.
He argues that actively fighting this fear and putting yourself out there can significantly, almost miraculously, improve your speaking skills because you're breaking through that self-imposed affective filter we talked about.
Facing the fear head on.
Totally. And then there's a really radical suggestion from Zik, apparently inspired by the podcast host himself, which is to actually start your own podcast.
Whoa. That sounds incredibly daunting for a learner.
It sounds radical, right? Me, start a podcast. But Zik isn't talking about a massive professional production with thousands of listeners.
Okay, yeah.
He means even just recording short audio clips of yourself, maybe 5 minutes about your day, a reaction to an episode, or practicing new vocabulary. The point is, you're externalizing your thoughts, practicing organizing them verbally, and crucially, You're listening back to yourself.
Ah, that self-correction loop again.
Exactly. It's incredibly powerful, and it forces you to face those fears of imperfection head on, just like he describes his own journey. He acknowledges that even he, a teacher, makes loads of mistakes he has to edit out, so learners shouldn't worry. He notes that his own confidence in voice develops significantly through this process.
That's really inspiring, actually.
Isn't it? And finally, a slightly less public, but still incredibly active speaking strategy from Zick. Okay.
He recommends that you always speak to yourself in the mirror and go crazy, become the next Hamlet.
Uh-huh. Okay. Maybe not full Hamlet.
Haha, yeah. But it emphasizes that speaking is not about passivity. You need to move your lips and find some interaction, even if it's just with your reflection. It helps you get comfortable with the physical act of speaking English.
Right. Just getting used to making the sounds.
Zick summarizes the benefits of all these active speaking practices. They work on pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and even listening skills as you listen to friends talking or to your own recordings. The source reinforces this call for listeners to share their own advice, fostering a sense of community as LEP ninjas.
LEP ninjas, I love it. Dedicated, fearless learners.
Exactly. That's a truly powerful call to action, and it really highlights the active mindset needed. Now, let's tie all this into the actual fabric of the English language itself, the underlying systems of grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and discourse. How does this comprehensive, balanced approach affect these specific language systems? Well, regarding grammar and vocabulary, the source immediately circles back to what we started with, the theory of exposure.
Right, the immersion idea.
Yeah. By engaging in extended, consistent, and enjoyable listening over long periods, you're basically feeding your subconscious with all the patterns of English usage. Your brain is constantly absorbing frequent word combinations, the correct prepositions, the natural flow of verb tenses, subtle pronunciation features.
All that stuff you don't consciously notice sometimes.
Exactly. This constant input without you consciously trying to memorize it all goes into your head, and critically, it informs your sense of instinct for the language.
An instinct.
Yeah. So when you face a test, or more importantly, a real-life conversation, you might simply feel the answer. You know that a particular preposition goes with a certain verb just because you've heard it so many times it feels natural and right.
Ah, like intuition.
Exactly. It's about feeding your head with English and learning to feel the English rather than knowing it in a purely analytical way. The source uses that great analogy. Use the Force, young Jedi.
Haha, nice. Trust your feelings.
Pretty much. And there's a fascinating side note. The source reminds us that engaging in language study is a profound way to keep your mind fresh and supple, citing an inspiring example of a 90-year-old grandfather who stays mentally sharp by regularly attending French and Spanish classes.
Wow.
It's a workout for your brain that offers lifelong benefits.
So that natural, almost intuitive understanding of grammar and vocabulary comes from exposure. What about pronunciation? How does this approach specifically enhance our ability to produce English sounds correctly and naturally?
Well, while simply listening extensively will naturally improve your pronunciation as your ear decodes sounds and patterns, the source really stresses the need to actively practice pronunciation.
Right. The active part is key.
Absolutely. It reiterates and reinforces the methods we've already covered.
Yeah.
Repeating, recording, re-recording, comparing, speaking in front of the mirror. It's about being proactive and deliberate. You need to identify where your mouth, tongue, and breath need to go to produce the correct sounds, and then physically practice them. The message is clear. Don't be shy. Give it a try. You've got nothing to lose, just things to gain. There's a direct, undeniable connection between understanding natural spoken English and being able to produce those sounds yourself accurately and fluently.
Okay. And finally, discourse. This sounds a bit more abstract, maybe a bit academic. What exactly is that, and how does it fit into practical language learning?
Yeah, discourse can sound a bit lofty, but it's essentially how you structure your speaking. It's the art of putting ideas together coherently.
Okay, linking things together.
Exactly. It encompasses how you link ideas, transition smoothly from one topic to another, and even how you gracefully handle those moments when you don't immediately know what to say, maybe using filler phrases or circumlocution, talking around a word you can't remember.
Ah, yeah, those little tricks.
Right. When you listen, the source suggests actively noticing any specific phrases the host uses for these functions. What are the tools I use to perform certain functions? Yeah, you might ask yourself.
Like connecting phrases.
Yeah, think of phrases like, on the one hand, on the other hand, or furthermore, consequently, or even simpler ones like so anyway, or right then. It's about using those linguistic connectors, those verbal signposts, that make your speech coherent, easy for your listener to follow, and gives you time to think.
Okay.
You can then try to identify these and consciously adopt them yourself. A great practice, the source suggests, is to try talking about a topic for 5 minutes without stopping, just to develop methods of thinking and talking at the same time, developing that mental agility.
That sounds incredibly challenging, but essential for fluency.
It is, absolutely, and it directly builds fluency and confidence. The source also encourages observing how people interrupt, agree, disagree, the way language is used to be polite or indirect, how humor is added, and crucially, how intonation affects the hidden meaning behind words.
Ah, like sarcasm or enthusiasm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The same word said with different intonation can convey totally different things. The advice is to explore these ideas actively when you listen, noticing these subtle nuances, and then bravely test them out in your own speaking. It's about understanding the rich tapestry of communication beyond just words and grammar, moving into the realm of truly effective and natural interaction.
So we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. Wow, this deep dive into effective English language learning really boils down to a core transformative message, doesn't it? It seems to be all about a balanced approach.
Yeah, definitely.
It's combining that powerful subconscious acquisition through authentic, consistently engaging listening with active, targeted practice across all 4 skills: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And crucially, it's about fostering and maintaining a positive, comfortable learning environment where you feel empowered, free to make mistakes, and encouraged to experiment without that burden of an effective filter.
That emphasis on consistent, enjoyable exposure as the primary driver for acquisition, complemented by focused active practice, it really is transformative.
Yeah.
It shifts the perception of language learning from, a tedious chore to an engaging, natural process. And it really leverages how our brains are actually wired to learn language.
Yeah.
It's about making learning a pleasure, not just a task.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, maybe consider this. How might you not just consume English today, but actively create with it? What is one small, tangible step you can take to become an active participant in the language rather than just a passive recipient, even if it feels a little bit like facing your fears?
Yeah.
Perhaps it's just a tiny step, but a crucial one on your path to fluency.
Think about Zick's courageous advice, about recording yourself or joining a community or even just talking to yourself in the mirror. Each of these actions, no matter how small it seems, contributes significantly to breaking down those internal barriers and building true fluency and confidence. Every moment you actively engage with the language, you're taking a step forward.
You're already on the right path by taking the time to listen to this deep dive. Now take these powerful strategies and integrate them little by little into your daily routine. The journey to fluency is an active, maybe even exhilarating one, and you've got all the tools you need. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.